In the year 2005, the developers at Intelligent Systems unveiled their latest project. It was another Fire Emblem, the most ambitious project of theirs yet. The developers had put everything they had into creating the best game they could, and it shows. The production values of this one are far beyond that of any Fire Emblem or even most Nintendo games. This game's got it all. Voice acting, a deep, intricate plotline, characters as memorable as Blazing Sword, the most varied maps and missions yet, stunning cutscene visuals, you name it, they've got it. This is the 9th entry into the series, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance for the Nintendo GameCube. Path of Radiance begins with our hero-to-be, Ike, training with his father, Grail. Grail leads a ragtag band of mercenaries, and the first few chapters deal with the jobs they take getting rid of bandits, but things get complicated when they find out the nations of Crimea and Dain have gone to war. Not only that, they happen upon the Princess of Crimea, leading Dain's soldiers to think she's hired them and attack the mercenaries. One of Dain's generals eventually shows up and, after a vague exchange, outright kills Grail in a one-on-one duel. This makes Ike the mercenary commander by default, and he sets out to defeat Dain, restore the princess to her throne, and potentially avenge the death of his father. This is a first for the series. Our hero isn't of noble birth by any means, though eventually he'll promote to a lord class in the story. It's pretty refreshing to have a character become a lord rather than start as one, and it's nice for the character to have a personal stake in this fight as well. Unlike the relatively safe storylines of Binding Blade and Sacred Stones, things are a little more complicated than Defeat Evil Empire roll credits, but much more planned and intricate than Blazing Sword. The plot holes are far fewer, the villains are far more effective, and Ike's growth as a character was handled fairly well. Not to mention the character writing remains as fantastic as ever. Path of Radiance also includes many scenes that are altered based on what the player does in the chapter, or what characters are dead, although there are some you'll rarely see, such as one conversation viewable only if your dancer-type character is attacked by the final boss. I mean, gee, who would allow that? Dancers fighting the final boss. To give an idea on how much the writing has advanced, here's the story behind probably my favorite character in the game, the archetypical red-haired wyvern rider, Jill. She's recruited when Ike and company are on a boat being assaulted by Lagoos, a race of humanoids that can shapeshift into cats, tigers, hawks, crows, even dragons, though in this case it's pirate crows. They function quite like the monarchies of the previous games, although they don't need stones or weapons at all, they just have their claws. Personally, I don't use them much. Anyways, Jill helps out Ike without realizing that Ike is Dain's enemy, and therefore her enemy, which puts her in a tight spot. She can't take them all on at once on their boat, and she can't flee to Dain, otherwise she'd be admitting to letting the enemy get away, so she has to stay with Ike for now. Dain also really hates the Lagoos, and so does Crimea to a lesser extent, but it so happens that Ike has Lagoos in his party by this point. Racism is certainly a running theme in this game, and some players take issue with how unsubtle the game is about it, but I digress. Jill eventually starts wondering why Dain despises the Lagoos and decides to stay with Ike permanently, until the party ends up fighting her own father. At this point, you might be thinking Jill's father can be recruited, it just makes sense after all. But the game warns you not to try it, and in fact, if you do it anyways, Jill betrays you and attacks you instead. Gotta hand it to the writers, it takes guts to write in an actual betrayal. It almost feels like you're being punished for trying to recruit the game's I don't want to kill him but I have to, Camus-type character. After this battle, the NPCs even start talking about the nasty Crimeans that offed a well-respected general right in front of Jill, who's on the side of those nasty Crimeans. It's a really harrowing experience for her, and for Ike too. Mechanically, Path of Radiance contains a lot of mechanics that were introduced in the SNES days. Unit inventories can now contain 4 weapons and 4 items, like Mystery of the Emblem. Mounted units can move again after any action, like in Genealogy. The skill system makes its glorious return, and this time there are limitations on how many skills a single character can have, although I've never reached that limit in normal play. There are plenty of new mechanics in play as well, such as biorhythm. This is a strange mechanic that basically makes units do better whenever they feel like it, I guess. It never really affected me too much though. You can also remove skills from a character, but this is permanent and you don't get the item used to teach it back, so be careful. There are plenty of cool new skills like Provoke and Shade, which affect the AI's targeting, usually, and skills like Astra, Luna, and Sol are now exclusive to certain promoted classes, and you can teach them these skills with the Occult Scroll. Give one of these scrolls to Ike, however, and he will have the infamously powerful Ether skill, which makes him use Luna and Sol in one round. Skills can be assigned or removed when at a base. Bases are a new feature in this game. The party resides at a base between chapters, and you can manage items and skills here. There are also conversations that can be viewed here, and they flesh out what's going on in the world at the time quite well. Some conversations even give you items or characters. Supports are also viewed only at bases, which I think was a great decision. Since the supports now take place out of battle, you don't have to deal with the strange situations that can occur, such as having lengthy conversations in the middle of battle, or having to deal with some characters partaking in their hobbies in the middle of battle, such as when Ford from Secret Stones was caught sketching in the middle of battle. Supports also increase based on the number of battles the compatible characters were in, rather than how many turns they sat next to each other, making it easier to actually use them strategically without wasting a bunch of time. Though this game also lacks a ranking system, so you can only really gauge how skilled you are at this game by how low your turn count is. One of my favorite little changes to this game is that thieves can now steal anything they want as long as they have more strength than the item's weight and it's not equipped. You should see what my convoy looks like at the end of a playthrough. Endless amounts of staves stolen from enemy bishops. They don't equip, so it's perfectly legal to steal every last one of them. Shops are also seen only in bases, and the shopkeepers themselves have been fleshed out as actual characters, which is pretty nice. In addition to buying and selling, you can now forge your own custom weapons once per chapter, though this isn't that in-depth. Forging basically involves buying a weapon and then paying extra money, a lot of it, to increase the damage, accuracy, crit rate, or weight of the item. You can lower all these as well, though I have no idea why you'd do that aside from lowering weight. Oh, and there's a glitch in the Japanese version that can give you a Thunder or Slim weapon with 255 crit, so that's a lot of fun to use. You're also able to change the color and name the weapons you make through forging, and it's rendered in 3D for all to see during the battle animations. Very fun idea. If you could add other properties like extra damage against certain classes or weapons that give skills, that'd be a lot of fun to mess around with and would carry a lot of depth, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of depth to the weapons beyond increasing the stats. Still, this is helpful because there are certain classes who have very low attack power, so it can be often difficult to give them kills and get them EXP, so if you forge them a powerful weapon, that helps alleviate the issue a little bit. Unmounted characters can now shove each other and even enemies around the map, which is helpful for getting people where you want them, shoving the healer out of enemy attack range, or shoving an enemy out of the way without killing him. In fact, there's an entire chapter based around shoving. And speaking of ranges, a new feature is that you can highlight enemy attack ranges, letting you view every possible square that can be attacked. Normally you'd have to count it out yourself, so this just makes life a whole lot easier. Each horseback unit has one of 4 physical weapons, and when they promote to Paladin, they can choose one other weapon type to start using. Though I'm not sure why you would choose anything but axes. I mean, you can use a steel axe at the lowest weapon rank, why would you pick anything else? Mages can also choose between using staves and a new weapon type used by thieves, the knife. I have no idea why you would pick knives over something that uses a mage's best stat, but whatever. Maybe they did it so they could nerf the pre-promoted sages, because they both start with knives instead of staves. Though now that I think about it, this game doesn't have a warp staff or a rescue staff, and those were the most overpowered staves in the GBA games. Ah well, I have no idea what's up with some of these changes sometimes. Strength and magic are now separate stats, by the way. The only stain on this otherwise excellent system is that strength now determines the speed penalty from using a heavy weapon. It was originally determined by Constitution, a static stat based on class, gender, and some characters would get a bonus to it. The entire idea here is that different classes are penalized different amounts for using heavy weapons, which creates a big difference between, say, a paladin using an axe and a fighter using an axe. But in Path of Radiance, it is based on strength now, a stat that increases when you level up. and characters like Ike and Boyd have crazy strength growth, so they're barely penalized at all for equipping something heavy. Meanwhile, mages get to deal with having only 1 or 2 strength the entire game, and for some reason they're still wielding tomes the size of a Harry Potter novel. This made mage characters arbitrarily hard to use in Path of Radiance in my opinion, but they're still worth it when they promote and gain staff uses. Those don't weigh anything at all. Speaking of mages, magic is now back to being a fire, wind, and thunder triangle, with light being neutral and there is no dark magic, strangely. There aren't any unpromoted light users this time. In fact, the only unit that can use light at all is the game's single priest once he promotes to bishop, though luckily they decided to make his light weapon rank synced to his staff rank, so you don't have to grind his ranks up. The cleric you get promotes to Valkyrie, but for some wacko reason she gets swords! Swords! On a magic type class? And don't tell me to use magic sword, she could have easily just gotten an actual magic rank. I actually find it a little odd that they give you only 2 unpromoted staff users and only one of them is capable of using light magic. It's honestly a little uneven. Speaking of promotions, you don't even strictly need a promotion item this time. The level cap is now 21 for unpromoted units, and when they hit 21, they'll promote automatically. In the previous games, it actually mattered quite a lot when and how many of each promotion item you were getting for free, since if you only had 3 guiding rings, you'd only be able to promote 3 magic units, for example. But here you can use as many of each class as you want, because they'll all eventually hit 21 and promote anyways. Or you could promote early with a Master Seal, but I don't usually do that. You can't choose what to promote into though. That and repeatable maps for EXP have been done away with, as were arenas. The map design has gotten a lot more varied than ever before. Thanks to the graphical prowess of the console we're playing on, every map has a distinct look from the next, and the map objectives are varied as well. There are defense maps, escape maps, siege maps, boss kill maps, but the feature that really sells the level design are the various side objectives. In addition to chests with treasures and items to steal, there are bonus objectives like letting your allies escape the map first, or sparing certain combatants from defeat. Completing such objectives, or winning with a low turn count, earns the player bonus experience points. At bases, you can distribute bonus points to any character you want, providing the option for leveling someone who's falling behind without putting them in the line of fire. This adds even more variety to how you play if you pursue the bonus objectives. One map wants you to spare as many innocent priests as possible, another grants you a bonus for taking the stealth approach. Stealth map. In a strategy game, I don't understand it really. Then there are the difficulty options. You can choose between easy, normal, and hard mode from the start, no need to complete a playthrough first. In the Japanese version, however, there was no easy mode, instead there was a super hard mode, known as Maniac or Lunatic. I guess they decided it was too hard for us Westerners and just decided to axe it, which is a real shame. Oh, and there's one other option for players who have cleared the game before. You can play with fixed growths, which means that level ups are no longer random, instead they'll be based on several factors such as what weapon you're using or the enemy you're fighting. Kind of a nice option, but it puzzles me as to why you have to wait for the second playthrough to do it. You'll also have access to items that boost growths on later runs, so I guess replay value? I mean, you've already won, so what is even the point? Also, if you clear the game, you can take your units into trial maps which function just like the ones in Binding Blade, and they come with a sweet remix of a song from Genealogy. I love that song, best one in the game. More trial maps are unlockable by playing on a higher difficulty, or linking with the GBA Fire Emblem games, although you'll never see the bonus character art of anybody from Binding Blade if you're playing the US version. Unless you've got a cheat device ready, and at this point, that's just to be expected. Anyways, there's no post-game like in Sacred Stones, and trial maps only do so much for the replayability, which for Path of Radiance is less than that of Sacred Stones, especially for Western players with no Maniac mode. Then again, having played Maniac mode and enjoyed it about as much as my cat's potty breaks, maybe we're lucky we missed out on that. Maybe. Still, Path of Radiance brings a lot to the table for veterans and new players to experience. There are dozens of game mechanics, both old and new, to mess around with, and unlike a certain unmentionable, the unique mechanics are inoffensive at the worst of it. Couple that with the best character and story writing we've seen in Fire Emblem so far, aside from a hiccup or two, and I really do think we have ourselves the very finest Fire Emblem game in the whole series, though Sacred Stones is still very much a personal favorite for me. However, there was still room for a sequel to Path of Radiance. What could the best in the series be followed up with? We'll just have to find out. Next time, Fire Emblem on the Nintendo Wii.